The warning. They ignored when I moved to Willow Creek Estates. It felt like the kind of neighborhood only seen in real estate brochures, perfectly trimmed hedges, pastel-painted homes, quiet streets echoing with laughter and bicycles. But beneath the calm, a homeowners association ruled like silent monarchs, and at the crown of this empire stood Mrs. Evelyn Harrington, the HOA president, known for her ironed blazers and iron heart. One summer evening, we all gathered at the community center. The room smelled like lemon cleaner and artificial lavender. I sat in the back, arms crossed, watching as residents whispered among themselves. Behind the podium stood Mrs. Harrington, clearing her throat as she presented a new project. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, "to enhance the beauty of our town, we have selected a decorative vine called Emerald Creeper. It's low maintenance, elegant, and will be planted along every fence, walkway, and public garden." I froze. I had seen that plant before, years ago during a research trip to a botanical reserve. It was invasive, unpredictable, consuming. I raised my hand. "Mrs. Harrington, this plant isn't safe. It spreads fast, damages structures, and once it establishes roots, it's almost impossible to remove." Her lips curved into a cold smile. "Ah yes, Mr. Carter, our neighborhood botanist." Laughter rippled through the room. "Are you suggesting a few vines will destroy our homes?" "I'm saying they might," I replied firmly. "These plants can grow several inches a day, sometimes even climb through cracks. I saw them overrun an entire section of concrete walls in one season." The whispers stopped. Eyes turned toward me. Mrs. Harrington, still smiling, added, "So you're saying you personally witnessed this plant destroy concrete? Perhaps it was a different species." "We consulted professionals." "No," I insisted. "It was this species. If their seeds spread, they'll take over lawns, pipes, even houses. I'm asking you to reconsider." She leaned into the microphone. "Noted, but we will proceed. Beauty should not be hindered by fear or exaggeration." The crowd applauded. That was the night I became the paranoid plant guy. 2 weeks later, trucks arrived loaded with soil, trellises, and thousands of small pots holding delicate green vines. Volunteers and hired landscapers placed them along fences, near mailboxes, around playgrounds, everywhere. The vines looked harmless then, almost elegant, with heart-shaped leaves and soft emerald tendrils curling around wooden posts. Mrs. Harrington stood proudly, hands on her hips, watching workers install the plants outside the HOA office. "See?" she called out as I walked past. "Harmless." I wanted to argue, but bit my tongue. Instead, I knelt beside one of the plants and gently brushed my fingers along its tendrils. They were stronger than they looked, firm, wiry, already clinging tight. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat at my desk, flipping through old notebooks. Sketches of the same plant filled the pages, drawn from when I had seen it choking iron rails, creeping into abandoned buildings, splitting stone with its roots. In my notes, I had written one thing in red ink: "Do not let it reach water or open soil. Once it does, it will not stop." Within days, the vines sprawled beyond their planting spots. I saw them crawling slightly farther each morning, like green veins across the ground. Some residents noticed but brushed it off. "How charming," said Mrs. Lewis next door, sipping iced tea. "They're already growing." She didn't notice the vine had anchored itself into her brick wall, but something else bothered me. Birds stopped perching near the plants. Squirrels avoided them, skittering away whenever the tendrils brushed the grass. A week later at the mailbox, I overheard 2 neighbors whispering, "My dog won't go near the fence anymore," one said. "Mine too." "And my garden is dying," the other replied. Still, the HOA dismissed it all. At the next meeting, I stood again. "It has begun," I said. "They're spreading faster than expected. Please remove them now while you still can." Mrs. Harrington didn't smile this time. "Mr. Carter, we will not entertain further panic. The plants are under control." "No," I said, my voice steady. "You think they are." She turned away. That night, as I looked outside, I saw the first true sign of what was coming. The vines had reached the storm drains. Their tendrils slithered across the concrete like searching fingers, disappearing into the darkness below. I whispered to myself, "It's too late." When the green became strange, by the second week, Willow Creek didn't feel the same. It still looked perfect to an outsider: whitewashed fences, brick mailboxes, flower beds bursting with color. But if you really paid attention, you'd notice it. Subtle changes, silent warnings, the vines. They were no longer dainty garden decor. Their stems had thickened, turning from thin green lines into twisting cords, strong enough to pry into stone. They crawled over fences, snaked beneath porch steps, even climbed lampposts like they were reaching for the sky. People still weren't scared. Not yet. They simply found the plants annoying. It started small. Mrs. Lewis called out to me one morning, waving her gardening gloves in frustration. "They've wrapped around my rose bush." I tried cutting them back, but they just grew back overnight. These things are relentless. I approached the vine, knelt and touched it. It was damp, not with dew, but with something sap-like, sticky. When I tugged at it gently, the vine pulled back, tightening around the rose stem like a snake around prey. "Leave it," I warned. "You'll only make it worse." She forced a laugh, but her voice trembled. "It's just a plant, dear." But was it? 2 streets over, someone posted a picture on the neighborhood app. A vine had cracked their driveway overnight. The concrete split clean in the center, like something beneath had forced it open. Comments poured in. "It's just moisture expansion. We'll send landscapers." HOA admin. "Why is nobody listening to me?" Me ignored again. That night I walked through the neighborhood. The streets were quiet. Porch lights glowed softly. But in the silence, I heard it. Faint, almost like breathing. The sound of leaves brushing, roots shifting, vines stretching. Something living. Something awake. I followed the sound to the storm drain near the playground. The vines had gone deeper. Thick ropes of green pulsed faintly as they descended into darkness. Beneath the metal grate, I could hear dripping water and something else. A low hum, like distant electricity. At the next HOA meeting, the room was tense. Papers shuffled. People exchanged uneasy glances. Mrs. Harrington stood at the podium, her usual composure cracking slightly. "Regarding the plants," she began, "some residents have expressed concerns. But please understand, they are harmless ornamental vines. Slightly aggressive, yes, but controllable." I stood up. Again, controllable. I repeated, "They've reached the storm drains. They're in our soil, our plumbing systems." I found tendrils wrapped inside sprinkler heads, and "That's enough," she snapped. "No, it's not," I said, voice rising. "Your obsession with beauty is going to destroy this place. These plants don't grow, they invade." Silence. Then someone whispered, "He's right. My backyard fence collapsed this morning. It was covered in vines." Another voice. "My dog won't stop barking at the garden at night." Then a mother stood, pale-faced. "My son says he hears whispering from the vines when it rains." Mrs. Harrington forced a tight smile. "Children have imaginations." I stared at her. "And what about the fact that they bloom at night? Or that their roots are digging toward pipes and water lines?" Gasps. A hand shot up. It was Mr. Bradshaw, the HOA treasurer. "With all due respect, if these plants are truly harmful, we should remove them." Finally. A crack in their armor, but Mrs. Harrington slammed her gavel. Crack. Motion denied. Meeting adjourned. She left fast, too fast. The next morning changed everything. House Nup 14 on Willow Lane vanished under green. Not gone, but buried. Swallowed. Thick vines covered the roof. Windows, doors, like a massive cocoon of leaves and stems. The mailbox lay on the ground, snapped. The family inside had escaped during the night after hearing creaking wood and feeling the walls shudder. Police arrived, unsure what to even file it as. Insurance agents took photos. Neighbors whispered. No one laughed anymore. At dusk, I stood in front of the house. The vines were moving slowly, curling tighter, pulsing like veins. The air smelled of moss and iron. Then I heard it. Tick-tick. Creak. Roots digging deeper. The day the town began to disappear, it began at dawn. A thick fog rolled into Willow Creek, except it wasn't fog. It was a mist of pollen, fine as dust, drifting from the vines that now covered half the fences in the neighborhood. It shimmered in the morning light, almost beautiful. until you stepped outside and felt it sting your skin like static electricity. By 7 a.m., people started coughing. Car alarms wouldn't stop going off because vines had curled into their undercarriages, tugging at wires. Lawns were no longer lawns. Green tendrils slithered across them like veins on a living creature. The vines were no longer silent. They made noise, soft rustling when no wind blew. A wet stretching sound when they pulled against rooftops. A faint crackling when roots split concrete. The HOA could no longer hold meetings. Not because they didn't want to, but because the vines had sealed the doors of the community center shut. It wasn't just spreading anymore. It was conquering. By noon, the first official emergency alert came through phones. Local alert. Residents advised to remain indoors. Avoid contact with unidentified plant growth. Do not attempt removal yourself. Authorities are investigating too late. The town maintenance workers tried trimming the vines using electric saws. I watched as they cut through thick cords of greenery. For a few seconds it worked. Then the vines reacted. They recoiled, then lunged, not like an animal, but like something pulled by a force underground. Tendrils wrapped around saws, boots, ankles. One worker screamed as the vines pulled him off balance, dragging him across the pavement until others freed him. His leg was bleeding. The vines had left behind shallow cuts, hundreds of thin lines. Like scratches from invisible claws, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I gathered a small group, people who finally believed me. There was Lena, a nurse from Maple Street, quiet but brave. Mr. Bradshaw, former HOA treasurer, now deeply apologetic. Ethan, a 17-year-old who'd been studying the vines under a microscope. And me, just a man who had been right too early. We met in my garage, maps spread over the workbench, the storm drains, I said, pointing at the blueprint. They're using the town's water system. That's why they're spreading so fast. If we cut off the water supply, they'll die? Lena asked hopefully. Or they'll fight harder, Ethan muttered. He pushed his glasses up. I found something under the microscope. The vines have cell structures like plant cells, but there's something else. They react to heat and sound. Almost like they can hear us. The room went quiet. So, Bradshaw said slowly, you're saying they're listening? Ethan nodded. And learning. That night our suspicions were confirmed. Streetlights flickered and went dark. Vines had climbed the poles and choked the wiring. Houses groaned under the weight of creeping roots. In some places, people could no longer leave their homes. Vines curled over doors like bars on a cage. The worst was Oak Ridge Avenue. Half the houses there had vanished under mounds of green leaves. From beneath the foliage, you could hear faint tapping or knocking. We didn't know if it was pipes, wood shifting, or people trapped inside. Mrs. Harrington, once proud and unshaken, was finally afraid. She stood on her porch, staring at the vines twisting around her mailbox. Her perfect hair was undone. Her hands trembled. You were right, she whispered when she saw me. No arrogance, just fear. What do we do? I should have said, you should have listened, but instead I said, help us, because this was no longer about pride. It was survival. That night we attempted to burn the vines at the storm drain entrance. We poured fuel, lit a match. For a moment flames roared, bright and powerful. Then silence. The fire died, snuffed out. The vines were wet. The plant had stored water beneath its bark-like surface. It had protected itself, and then they moved all at once. The roots beneath us trembled. A deep vibration rolled through the ground like a heartbeat. From the storm drain, a low groaning sound echoed up, as though something massive and ancient breathed below the town. Lena grabbed my arm. What was that? I didn't want to answer, because I knew. We hadn't just planted vines, we had awakened something underground. That night, I wrote only one sentence in my journal. It's no longer spreading across the town, it's growing from beneath it. The town that fell silent by the fourth week. Willow Creek was no longer a neighborhood, it was a memory. Streets vanished under layers of thick moss and vine. Street signs were nothing but green silhouettes. Cars sat frozen in driveways, half devoured by roots that curled around tires like hungry hands. The silence was the worst part. Not peaceful silence, but the heavy, suffocating kind that felt like the earth was holding its breath. No children played outside. No dogs barked. No lawnmowers hummed. Just one sound remained, a soft, constant rustling, like the town itself was whispering secrets through leaves. The disappearance, people began to vanish. Neighbors who tried to escape at night never made it past the main road. Vines blocked every exit, forming walls, shifting like living barricades that sealed the town from the world outside. Phones lost signal. Electricity flickered out one street at a time. Eventually, only a few houses still had power, mine included, thanks to an old generator in the basement. But power couldn't stop what was coming. One evening, we walked to the abandoned HOA office. The door was cracked, vines creeping through broken windows, like fingers searching for a pulse. Inside, dust floated through the air. Papers lay scattered across the floor. The community bulletin board still displayed cheerful flyers. Garden contest next month. Pool party, all members welcome. Beautify Willow Creek. How ironic. As Ethan sifted through cabinets, he stopped cold. You need to see this. He laid out a file labeled Project Evergreen, confidential HOA documents. Inside were contracts, invoices, photographs. And at the bottom, a letter signed by Evelyn Harrington. It read, Emerald Creeper was provided by Green Grove Laboratories for experimental landscape enhancement. Growth capabilities are accelerated. HOA will receive $40,000 in funding for exclusive suburban trial. Effects minimal and reversible, Lena's voice cracked. She knew. She knew it wasn't normal. Mrs. Harrington stood silently in the corner, face pale, eyes wet. For once she had nothing to say in her defense. I didn't know it was this dangerous, she whispered. They told me it was safe. They said it would put Willow Creek on the map. Oh, I said quietly, you've put it on the map. Just not the way you planned. The living heart. We discovered something else in the documents. Handwritten notes from Green Grove researchers. Observe root intelligence. Network behavior similar to neural patterns. Do not allow proximity to groundwater. If connected to natural. Aquifer, terminate immediately. My stomach dropped. Willow Creek sat directly above an underground water reservoir. The plant hadn't just rooted into soil. It had found the aquifer, and now it was feeding. Journey into the green. We made a plan. The vines were thickest in the town center, in the plaza near the fountain. That's where the core was, where the roots pulsed under the ground like veins beneath skin. We packed backpacks, flashlights, axes, a canister of industrial herbicide I had locked away in my shed for years. At dawn, we set out. The town was unrecognizable, lampposts bent under weight of leaves. Mailboxes were buried. Entire houses were swallowed, only the shapes of rooftops visible under domes of green. As we walked, the ground trembled faintly, like something breathed beneath it. At the plaza, the fountain was gone, replaced by a mound of vines and roots. The air was thick with pollen, glowing faintly in sunlight. In the center of the mass, a swollen root pulsed like a living heart. Ethan whispered, It's alive, a single organism. Lena gripped her mask tighter. So how do we kill it? I pulled out the canister. From the inside. Confession and consequence. Suddenly Mrs. Harrington stepped forward. No, she said. This is my fault. I'll do it. Her voice shook, but her eyes were steady. Before any of us could stop her, she waded into the vines. They curled around her ankles, but she kept walking. She reached the heart of the plant, opened the canister, and pressed the trigger. A hiss, then a scream, not from her, from the ground itself. The vines recoiled, spasmed, thrashed like dying serpents. Leaves blackened. Roots curled inward. Mrs. Harrington collapsed. The heart stopped pulsing. For a moment, just one, we thought it was over. Then the earth rumbled, deep, violent. Ethan shouted, Run! It's collapsing! We fled as the plaza cracked open, roots tearing free like massive tentacles retreating underground. Houses shook. Trees split. Dust filled the air. When it stopped, an eerie quiet fell over the ruins. The plant was dying, but Willow Creek was gone. That night, I wrote in my journal, she destroyed the heart of the vines. But in doing so, she broke the heart of the town. The town that nature took back 3 days after the collapse. The smoke cleared. Willow Creek was no longer a place. It was a scar on the earth, what had once been manicured lawns. Painted fences and perfect sidewalks was now a graveyard of twisted vines, shattered houses and silent streets. The air smelled of ash and damp soil. The vines had turned black and brittle, curling in on themselves like burnt paper. The town didn't die with thunder or fire. It died quietly. Only the wind moved now, whispering through hollow windows and broken tree limbs. Emergency teams finally arrived, too late, like distant thunder after lightning strikes. Their boots crunched over dead vines as they moved house to house, searching for survivors. They found some, but not many. The survivors. Our small group sat on what remained of the library steps. Me, Lena, Ethan, Mr. Bradshaw. The rest, gone, missing, or unaccounted for. Mrs. Harrington's body was found near the plaza, slumped beside what was once the breathing heart of the vines. Her hand still gripped the empty herbicide canister. Her face was peaceful, as if she'd finally stopped fighting. "They'll call her a villain," Bradshaw said quietly. "They'll call her a hero," Lena replied. "They'll be right," I whispered. The investigation scientists came, botanists, government officials in black suits with clipboards and cold eyes. They fenced off the town, put up signs, "Hazard Zone, no entry biological contamination. Trespassers will be prosecuted." They drilled into the earth and studied the blackened roots. One scientist asked me, "When did you first notice abnormal behavior in the plant?" I almost laughed. "When we planted it." They didn't smile. They took samples, photographs, notes. They wore masks and gloves and never touched the soil with bare hands. But they didn't hear what I did at night. Under the ground, something still moved. A town buried in green and memory weeks past. News channels called it the town devoured by its own garden. HOA horror, plant experiment gone wrong, botanical disaster. Man warned them. No one listened. Reporters wanted interviews. I turned them away because this wasn't a story. It was a warning. The world would forget in time. They always do. They'd turn it into documentaries, horror podcasts, internet theories. But we, those of us who were here, we would remember. Every creak of wood, every whisper of leaves, every night. The vines crawled closer. The last journal entry, it was my final evening in Willow Creek before they evacuated us permanently. I walked one last time to the plaza, now just cracked stone and shriveled vines. Everything was still, or almost, at the base of a broken lamppost. Between 2 stones I saw something, a tiny green sprout, delicate, alive. Its leaf was shaped like a heart. Its vine curled slightly toward the earth as if listening. I crouched down. Breath caught in my throat. It was small, harmless looking, but I knew better than anyone. Nothing starts as a monster. Something makes it one. I didn't pull it out, not because I was afraid, but because part of me wondered. If nature wasn't the enemy, maybe it was the mirror, showing us what happens when we try to control what we do not understand. Epilogue. The new silence. They closed Willow Creek indefinitely. No rebuilding, no demolition. They let it stand, a silent monument to what we lost, our homes, our certainty, our arrogance. Grass grows over the roads now. Birds nest in chimneys. Time is covering the ruins gently, like the town is being tucked in for a final sleep, and somewhere underground. A root shifts, a seed waits, and the earth breathes.